Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown on the build that I've been playing this league. It's gone through quite a few transformations and I'm now playing pretty much completely solo, and I'm able to achieve some pretty crazy currency per hour in terms of results. A lot of people have been asking me to kind of go through my build, and I will be doing a bigger kind of build guide on Tornado Shot to explain all the different aspects and directions you can take the build in, and how to level it, and kind of gear choices and gear progression and all that stuff. But a lot of people have been sending me tons of questions like about what I'm doing right now, so I thought I'd make a little bit more of an in-depth video on what I'm actually doing in game as we speak and on the stream. So I'll take you through my gear choices and kind of overall. So the idea behind the build, as you're seeing in the background here, is to get maximum movement speed, maximum area of effect, and maximum attack speed. And then do Alch and Go maps, or Alch and Sextants and Vials and all that kind of stuff. Basically low tier white maps and get as many monoliths per hour as possible. So currently in Legion League, there's a couple of ways of thinking, but my way of thinking is that because the monoliths are just so lucrative, all you really care about is getting to them as quickly as possible, completing them, finishing off the map as fast as possible, and then getting into the next map. It doesn't really matter about Sextants a lot of the time, and you can achieve like hundreds and hundreds of chaos per hour just by using this strategy. Multiple people have done it on multiple different builds now. I think my in terms of my record in terms of like chaos per hour, I'm doing a test right now on Twitch TV where I'm grinding a headhunter from Alch and Go maps, and we're already up to like 43 or 44 exalts worth of currency, maybe a little bit more than that, might be closer to 50, in just 12 hours doing Alch and Go maps while talking to chat and kind of chilling out as well. We were timing that. So it's definitely very lucrative, and this is definitely, in my opinion, one of the best builds, and we'll go through the path of building and all that stuff. But the number one stat, in my opinion, that everyone should be looking for is movement speed. Movement speed will help you get through the map, it'll help you like navigate the Legion once it like pops out, and it'll help you like crack open the Legion as well. So basically any build like Essence Contagion, Cyclone's probably pretty decent, Ice Nova and Val Ice Nova, any sort of Herald based build will do very well. All you need is some mechanic to break out the entire Legion in just a few seconds and then clean it up, and then the rest needs to go into movement speed. So in this video you're obviously seeing Tornado Shot, and the gear is very insane, but people wanted to see, so I'm going to show it off and we will get straight into it. So we'll I actually did this test is just a bit of an interesting one. We did 13 maps in 14.5 minutes, so it's very quick pace, but we will get into the character now. So here we are. We just actually did those maps, so it's the same build, but I'm going to go over a few key points and then we'll bring up the path of building. So right now our movement speed with the flasks on and Tailwind fully stacked is 451%. That's how fast we move in the maps without Headhunter stacks. So that is completely obtainable, and you will be able to go even faster without the Headhunter. So yeah, pretty crazy. I got a lot of friends telling me they're getting pretty good results, they're getting similar results. Everyone is starting to gravitate towards this kind of playstyle, this white map, this Alch and Go kind of style. A few people are still on the red maps, but this is definitely looking like a very good league for new beginners to make a lot of currency. So what are some of the key items that you want to be looking for in terms of this build, and maybe to work into your other builds as well, like if you're playing Essence Drain or Cyclone? So one of the most popular items this league is going to be Shadows and Dust, or the Bisco's Leash Belt. Now this specific pair of gloves is going to give you Rampage. Now Rampage is a pretty unique effect. You can only get it in a few different ways. There's a couple of weapons, there's the Bisco's belt, and then there's a kind of a series of gloves. There's 3 different pairs of gloves, but these are commonly considered the best pair of gloves because they have offensive stats on them. The others are more defensive or niche. So what do these gloves do, and what does Rampage do? So Rampage is a pretty interesting mechanic. Basically you can have up to 1000 Rampage stacks, and per 20 Rampage stacks you're going to get 2% damage and 1% movement speed. So it's pretty cool, and obviously once you get up to those maximum, the 1k Rampage stacks, you would have 50% increased movement speed, which if you're a Deadeye is multiplied again. So that 451% move speed is without Rampage as well. So you're going really fast, as you could kind of see in the video. So pretty interesting there. If you're looking for a bit more movement speed, you can jam in Rampage to your build and you will feel it. It also gives you quite a lot of AoE clear, and these gloves are like 1C right now. And even if you want to get a good corruption on them, they're extremely cheap. I picked up a pair of +1 ones of these for 7C. So pretty insane. Indeed. Definitely can recommend this one here. So the next thing you probably want to be looking at getting is a pair of movement speed boots. So the movement speed boots, the fastest boots you can get are 7 league steps. This is going to make you feel a lot quicker. Traditionally, boots can only get up to 35% movement speed this league if you got rares, and there's not too many uniques that have anywhere close to this amount of movement speed. So 50% is pretty much like, I don't know, like 30 or 40% more movement speed over the normal uniques. And then you can also get a Labyrinth enchant on this to have 10% increased movement speed if you haven't been hit recently. Now, if you're playing any sort of AoE build, you're not going to get hit very often. So you're going to have this up most of the time, which is pretty damn interesting in my opinion. So pretty cool. Jam these into your build or play them on this build and you'll be looking pretty damn good to go. So of course, Headhunter, you don't need that. That's not mandatory at all. A lot of my friends are doing the same strategy and they don't have Headhunter. So the next thing I want to talk about is an amulet. So obviously this one's a pretty crazy amulet, but if you don't have Headhunter or you don't intend to get Headhunter, there's actually a better option for you than this one. You can either use a rare or you can use a Karui ward. Basically this is a really cheap amulet with 10% movement speed on it, I believe. So that's going to give you some more movement speed, and then you can also get a corruption on that amulet, which is an additional 10% movement speed, giving you 20% movement speed, which is almost as good as boots already. So you can see that movement speed is just everywhere. You can get it pretty much on most of the gear slots, like you can get it through gloves by like Rampage, and get it on the boots by just getting the boots, and you can get it on the amulet just from that amulet, or corrupting any of your amulet of your choice. In terms of rings, there's not too many options, unfortunately, but you know, this is a good place to get your resistances then, because you can you'll definitely be needing some resistances. So in this character currently, we're not capped on resistances, but we use the Dying Sun Flask, and then we will be capped on resistances after that's activated. And at the speeds we're going, you should always have these flasks up and ready to go. So the next part of the build that I want to talk about is Queen of the Forest. So Queen of the Forest is a very popular item in this league, and it's going to be probably popular for as long as it stays in the game. So basically, if your build can run Queen of the Forest without giving up too much, I would highly recommend it, but there is one prerequisite to running Queen of the Forest, and that is that your build can hit 45,000 evasion with flasks up. So if we take a look, I'm at 50,000 evasion. So what you can do is have one of these flasks here, a perpetual jade flask of reflexes. It doesn't need to be perpetual, but in general, a jade flask of reflexes will do quite well. Now, if you're really struggling to get that 45,000 evasion, you can also use a Stibnite flask or an Alchemist's jade flask of reflexes, and that Alchemist Stibnite flask of whatever you need. So that's pretty interesting, and you'll be able to hit 45k that way. And basically what Queen of the Forest will allow you to do is gain 50% increased movement speed. So you've got 60% here, a potential 50% here, another 50% here, another 10 to 20% here. So you can see it's starting to add up very quickly to a pretty insane amount of movement speed there, which is pretty cool in my opinion. Now, another helmet that you could look into getting is either a 2-socket light poacher and putting a few jewels in it, which I'll show you now. We'll just take a look here. Yoink, nothing to see there. Okay, so what you want to be looking for is a few Abyss jewels, which have 2 movement speed modifiers on them, and then the other one you can get whatever you want. So if you're really struggling to get a lot of movement speed, additional movement speed on the tree, but for example, maybe you're not a ranger, you're not in this area which has a ton of movement speed in it. Maybe you're over here as like a Templar or something like that. You can actually have a bit of a band-aid fix for that, and that is by using Abyss Jewels. So there's actually 2 interesting modifiers on Abyss Jewels which are going to help you guys out a lot, especially if you're not playing as Deadeye. And that is the increased movement speed if you haven't killed recently, and then increased movement speed if you haven't taken damage recently. Sorry, if you've killed recently. So that's 4 and 4. That's 8% movement speed right there. So 3 of these jewels is almost a pair of boots, which is pretty interesting. So basically, if you have a light poacher with 2 sockets, you can kind of do some pretty interesting things with that. Not only will you get the spirit explosions, which are pretty cool for clearing out the Legion, maybe give you a bit more cleanup, maybe help you out a bit with the AoE there. You'll also be able to get 16% movement speed for most of the time in the map, providing that your build doesn't get hit too often, which is pretty cool in my opinion, and it's a really good band-aid fix for builds that can't get down to that movement speed. In my future build, I've noticed that it's kind of difficult to get down there, so I've been jamming a lot of these jewels in there, and they're definitely working out pretty well for me as well. So definitely a quick tip there. Obviously the other choice is Devotos. So you can get a 20% movement speed helmet here, marginally better than the light poacher, but it's consistent movement speed, and it also has attack speed on it, which we'll get into just a second. But attack speed is also very, very important for builds. Maybe, unless you're playing Cyclone, then it's not as important, but we'll get to that in a second. So very, very interesting there. We've got pretty much our full movement speed arsenal here. Few honorable mentions. There's some weapons with movement speed on them, like the Griffin, but that's going to be forcing you to sacrifice your weapon slot. Maybe if you're a spellcaster, that's not a big deal, but for someone using bows, I can't really afford to do that. I guess if you really wanted to go crazy, you could have your bow or your item of choice with a shaped modifier on it to give you more movement speed, but at this point I don't really think that's necessary, for me at least, because I already move so fast. The actual limiting factor of my build is how fast my brain can move my character, or how fast I can loot items and click them. So that's the limiting factor on my clear speed now. It's not necessarily how fast I attack or how fast I kind of move, because I already move so fast, especially with Headhunter. So a few other things to note. In the most recent patch, GGG has changed the Legion army so that when you break out monsters, it counts as kills. So that this would solve the on-kill effect, big issue that they have. But what that also allows is for Rampage to count twice. So let's say that an army is worth 300 monsters, right? 300 monsters in the army. Not only will you get 300 Rampage stacks for breaking out the army, you'll get an additional 300 Rampage stacks for completing the broken out army, so you'll get 600. So you're basically double dipping on Rampage, but that also works for Headhunter and Inspired Learning as well, so that's why everyone's kind of complaining Headhunter's too good. You get double the amount of Headhunter stacks out of the Legion, and basically what this allows you to do is, on some maps, once you get to the Legion, you'll go automatically up to like 30 Headhunter stacks and 600 Rampage stacks a lot of the time, and be able to finish the rest of the map in less than like 20 or 30 seconds, which is pretty absurd in my opinion. So very, very cool there, very interesting. The final piece of movement speed gear I will tell you guys about before going into the skill tree and kind of like a little bit more details about attack speed is the Alchemist Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline. So this one is probably the first movement speed item you want to be looking at getting, and you want to be trying to get a really good roll on this to try and get the maximum amount of movement speed. So right now you can see my Flask here has 30% increased movement speed during Flask effect, and then I also have the Alchemist modifier on here, which increases the initial Flask effect by 25%. So it actually is 50% increased movement speed from the Flask, and then another 30% from the modifier. So that's already 80% increased movement speed just from this Flask alone, which is pretty insane, because the Deadeye multiplies that again by 20%. So I'm not going to do the math on that. I think that's 96% just from a Flask. And you can keep this up pretty much 100% of the time. In addition to that, you also have Onslaught, which you should be trying to get into your build in some way or form. What this gives you is 20% movement speed and 20% attack speed and cast speed. So this is really good for pretty much any and every build trying to clear monoliths as fast as possible and then finish the map as well. So you want to be looking for a permanent source of Onslaught, either through a Flask or through like an Abyss Jewel or something on the tree. Now, we're going to go to one other thing here, and that is a Historic Jewel. So there is one Historic Jewel in particular which I think you guys will be interested in, and that is the Maraketh Historic Jewel. Currently, you can get a movement speed modifier on any of the notables. like this one here. So if I put a Marrakech jewel in here, I could get movement speed on this one, this one, this one, this one, basically any notables in the radius. So you can get a lot of movement speed from this jewel as well. And you can also get permanent onslaught from the Marrakech jewel as well. So if you ended up with a good one of those, with a ton of movement speed on it, which is good for you, that could also be a good source of movement speed. So very, very interesting. The overarching theme here is you want a lot of move speed to get through that map quick, get to the next pack of monsters, get to that monolith fast, get to all that kind of stuff. And the more maps you do, the faster you do them, the more currency you will earn. And yeah, because we're only alching and going, most of that currency is going to be profit, just straight in your pocket, and anyone can do it. That's what's so cool about this league. You're just a brand new player, just got to white maps, no problem. Just buy a few, alchem, and you will make money. It's impossible not to. So super duper cool and super duper fun. Okay, so just to go into a few more specifics about my build now, we'll jump into path of building. So we'll go over a few choices, skill gem links, all of that kind of stuff for people who are just kind of interested in the tornado shot specifically. So to begin with, basically I have respected my character completely for movement speed, neglecting damage, neglecting all that kind of stuff, and you can do this pretty much at a very low gear level. You don't need the gear level that I have. Most people who I've talking to have respect their character in a similar way. You don't need level 100. We're going to go over a few options here. You don't need inspired learnings, anything like that. Again, this is without headhunter. Like if I take off my headhunter and my inspired learnings, this number will not change. You will still have 451% increased movement speed, which is pretty cool. Let's begin. For starters, I chose Alira because resistances are going to be a bit of a problem with this amount of movement speed gear on, so you will want to go for that. But if your build can take the resistance penalty, you can also go with Creighton, which is more movement speed and more attack speed, which is pretty interesting. So let's get started. Recently on Deadeye, I have discovered that chain is actually insane. Even without any sort of other forms of chain, you want to be looking at fitting in the chain support gem. But we'll get to that in a second. But in terms of the ascendancy, you of course want Tailwind. Gathering Winds here. Very, very powerful. It's a 20% more modifier on your action speed, which is your movement speed and your attack speed and basically your animation speed. Just everything becomes 20% faster. And that's what makes Deadeye one of the best ascendancies in the game. It's very, very difficult to compete with Deadeye's clear speed because of this reason. Next up, you want to grab Far Shot. This is just a connecting kind of node in general. And you, of course, want Chain. This is going to couple with your Rigwald's Quill's Quiver perfectly. And we'll go into more details in a second about that. But this isn't going to be a complete definitive guide. This is just going to be kind of a guide on the movement speed variant. So if you're looking for kind of a more introduction kind of guide, that'll be coming up. Don't you worry, guys. So the big change which I've made here is endless munitions. Normally I would take fast and deadly for 50% more global accuracy, but as you can see here, my hit chance is 98% already. I don't even need to worry about this. Now this is a result of the new changes to accuracy. They've changed some of the math on it, and we've just ended up with more hit rating than we've ever had before without taking this ascendancy, which is pretty crazy. I'm not sure why that happened or something like that. Basically they buffed bow builds by a lot by doing this. And because of this reason, you no longer need to take this node. Sure, some of the attack speed was nice, but there's a reason why we're going to take this one here. First of all, you get an additional projectile, which is pretty cool for your tornado shot. It's just like a more damage multiplier. I don't know the exact amount, it's probably like 7 or 8% more damage because of the TS, but it'll also give you more coverage, more arrows on the screen, which is pretty cool. But the really big kicker here is 50% increased area of effect, and that's what's really cool about this one, at least in my opinion. Because 50% increased area of effect affects Herald of Ice, and Herald of Ice puts in a ton of work in Legions, and I'll explain why in just a second. But that's the ascendancy covered. Those are my choices, and I'll be using this moving forward. So, in terms of the skill tree, there's a few things I want to point out. We have a Grace Watcher's Eye. That's 15% more increased movement speed. So we got another bit of movement speed there. This one's going to be on a class by class basis. If you're not a Deadeye using Grace, you probably won't want to be using this one. But we have 15% there. You don't need to take this, but it's nice big attack speed bump, and I'm already down here for Avatar of the Hunt. So it definitely seemed worth it for the 3 points to get another 3% move speed, dexterity, and attack speed per note. So pretty nice. We've got another 9% movement speed here, which is pretty damn cool. We've got another 9%, sorry, not 9%, 6% here. We've got some more movement speed over here on these nodes here. And a bit more movement speed over here. Now you can see obviously I'm prioritizing movement speed everywhere just to get up to that massive number to allow me to really just become a rocket ship, become the Flash. I wanted to become the Flash, and I think I have achieved that by taking all the movement speed on the tree. So a few other notable things though, we will get into it, is that I respect a lot of my my life nodes for attack speed, and that is because when you're moving through maps, we'll actually roll some footage here. It's very important to get out of the animation lock, which is associated with skills. So all the time that you spend attacking is time you're not spent moving. So it's basically like movement, like, okay, so I was talking about Cyclone before. So builds like Cyclone, they don't really mind if they're stuck in their animation, because, I mean, who cares? They're moving anyway. But builds like Tornado Shot, every like millisecond that you're firing a Tornado Shot is a millisecond you're not moving, which is a problem. So increased attack speed will reduce the amount of time that you're spent in that animation, which is really important for maximizing your clear speed. That's like a second here, a second there in every map, which is pretty cool in my opinion. And you want to try and get as much attack speed as possible, which is pretty important in my opinion. So next up, we'll go into a few other things. So yeah, maximum attack speed is pretty cool. Where were we? We're on this one here. And it's just going to be really good for you. So next up, we of course have an unnatural instinct up here. Now this is getting into it. This jewel is going to suck for 99% of builds unless you need more movement speed, and that's what we needed. We needed more movement speed. So we got into that, and we got another 9% movement speed and another 3, 9, and 13% attack speed. Now there's another few kind of nice things here. There's like some accuracy, we get some life from that, but we mainly did it for the movement speed and the attack speed. So we went up there and we got this one here. And of course we're getting damage from the dexterity nodes, which is pretty cool, because we're using a dex stacking bow. Next up, we also have a Transcendent Spirit. This is completely non-mandatory. You can jam one of those abyss jewels I mentioned earlier in here and you'll be having a blast. But I decided to use this to get the 8% movement speed because I wanted it consistently. I was scared that something was going to hit me, but in hindsight, the Abyss Jewel is just perfectly fine here. It's way cheaper, and you actually probably want that more, especially if you're using the bow I'm using, because you get 40 more dexterity out of that, which is pretty important. So in terms of everything else is focused on getting, maximum juice. We wanted to get 2 Inspired Learnings. We obviously got the Headhunter, that stacks with Solstice Vigil, and obviously when you're doing the Legions, you get twice the amount of buffs. So that's going to give you a lot of speed, a lot of AoE, and a lot of the good stuff, basically, which is pretty cool. So, next thing we want to mention, we have 50% increased area of effect from Endless Munitions. Keep that in mind, because one of the really cool things this patch is Herald of Ice, and it's going to be basically kind of like a crutch for a lot of builds. And the reason Herald of Ice is so good is because in Legions, it's so densely packed. The more AoE you have, the more of the Herald of Ices will overlap and kind of like shotgun the monsters. And now why this is relevant is, it's not relevant necessarily for the white monsters. It is relevant for rare monsters. So let's say that a rare monster is surrounded by a pack of like 5 white monsters. If your Herald of Ices all trigger on the white monsters, but you traditionally wouldn't be able to kill a rare monster, if the Herald of Ices overlap on that rare monster, you could now potentially kill it, which is going to allow you to one-shot that legion far more effectively than you would otherwise be able to. So increasing the area of effect of your heralds is actually a really good way to help you clear those legions better and more efficiently. So I've looked for ways to try and get as much AoE into my build as possible and get my herald as powerful as possible, to kind of like increase that that shotgunning effect in the legions and try and get a bit more clear speed. So we'll go into the Herald now. It's kind of a bit excessive. It's definitely not something that you want to be doing first. But if you're looking to take it even further, or you're a more Herald-focused build, juicing up your Herald can be a really cool thing to do and really fun thing to do. So we're going to get into what I did to my Herald and all that stuff. Actually, we're going to do that in game. So I have a 6-link Herald of Ice. Definitely excessive, I know, but it's really fun. So we have Herald of Ice here, it's 2120, and we also have Onslaught attached to that. So this is my way of getting permanent Onslaught. Basically, this is going to be up 100% of the time. It'll never fall off you. You will have Onslaught permanently. Which is pretty cool, as long as you're killing monsters, of course. Now, to make sure I have enough mana left over to still use Grace and my abilities, I am using it in Enlighten 4, but you don't actually need to use this. Sure, it'll be a little bit more uncomfortable. This is just a quality of life thing. You can do it on a 5-link, and you can not need the 6-link or the 4th blue, but it'll just be a little bit less, more uncomfortable because you can't shoot as many TSs as you can with the Enlighten. So definitely not mandatory by any means at all. Next up, here we go, increased area of effect. So we have another 50% increased area of effect here. So it's 50% from Deadeye, 50% from the gem, and then we also have Dying Sun, which is going to give another 22% increased area of effect in this scenario, which is pretty cool. So that's already a good amount. But what makes this really insane is that Headhunter can give even more AoE. So sometimes your heralds are just so massive, it's so dumb. So very, very powerful indeed, and very, very fun. Also links to this, we still have our Curse on Hit Assassin's Mark, which is traditional. So super cool, we got a 6-link herald there. So now let's get into the main links. When you're clearing low tier content, it's very important to kind of consider how you can get the most coverage possible. So on Tornado Shot, traditionally we've used Fork and Chain. We've used 1 chain and 1 fork. Now, I've been talking to a few other Tornado Shot players, and we've all come to the conclusion that the chain gem, taking us from 1 chain to 3 chains, is insanely powerful, and you should be using it for pretty much all content if you have the damage to support it. Now, it does come with a downside, 10% less damage, but you will be getting so much more AoE, so much more quality of life, and so much more juiciness out of this gem that it's ridiculous not to use it. Just to give you guys an idea. So basically, when you shoot a tornado shot, boom, 1 tornado shoots out 5 arrows. With Fork, that'll turn into 10 arrows if all those arrows hit targets. And then after that, it will chain traditionally once. So you're getting, it hits 5 times, and then it hits 10 times, and then it'll hit 10 times again. But with the gem, it'll now hit 10 and 10 again. So that's just so many more hits. The arrows are just like ding, 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 ding. It's like a pinball machine. It's ridiculous. It's so crazy. So chain is number 1. All you need to do is support it with damage, and that is why I'm using this bow. However, I've talked to Marty PoE, a streamer on Twitch, and he assures me that it's completely fine in tier 16 maps with just a Windripper bow. So you guys are going to be able to do it just fine. I mean, I just have this bow, so I whacked it on. If you're using Windripper, you should still be fine using chain, and you guys are going to be able to feel the effects. As long as you can still kill a boss, it's basically fine to go with chain, and you guys are going to have a blast with it. So that pretty much covers everything. I will cover one more thing though, and that is if you don't have bleed immunity on the tree via a corrupted jewel, you can just use a bleed immune silver flask. So, just to wrap this video up, I'm sure it was actually kind of a long one. Oh well, maybe you guys have really still enjoyed it anyway. I want to talk about a few things. A lot of people have been debating, is Magic Find better? Is Clear Speed better? What am I going to do? So it's basically, I would just say, do whatever is most fun for you. So obviously I've been doing that test over on Twitch. I've been getting almost like 500 or 600 chaos per hour. That's what it worked out to be. I got no Magic Find gear on. I'm full clear speed, just running through as many Alchemist maps as possible. And I mean, that's enough chaos for anyone to make any build they want, or really get a headhunter, anything like that if you put enough time in. So, I mean, at that point, it's just whatever you really enjoy more. Like maybe you can make 700 chaos per hour, 800 chaos per hour with Magic Find, although I find that unlikely because you'll have to drop some of the movement speed and clear speed. If you find that more fun, definitely go with that strategy. It's basically just going to be do whatever map you find most fun, as long as it's pretty open and it's a pretty short layout, you're going to have a blast. And do whichever kind of strategy on your gear you find most fun. Maybe you like Essence Drain, maybe you like Cyclone. As long as you got some movement speed in that, you're going to be good to go. So that's going to be the video, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. Plenty more content coming. The full Tornado Shot guide with all the bells and whistles will be coming out. This is just sort of like a little bit of an introduction to the one thing I've been specifically doing here. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.